This is the Unscripted Podcast.
3, 2, 1, action.
All right, we got a special episode today. Is right here. So, at the time of the airing of this podcast, time that we're recording it, Chris and Tom are in Honduras doing a little trip, and so Chip's on here today. So everybody meet Chip and comment and say hi to Chip. Chip, you can say hi to everybody.
Hi to everybody.
It's some pretty good. We got some great elders, and it's a real challenge sometimes for people to go, yeah, I'll come on the podcast and get a challenging question, and then make the decision that you're willing to be vulnerable to for us to ask a question and us not know in the beginning of it.
Just may be dangerous.
Yeah. So Ben, did you get a picture of Chris on the flight with his mask? Yeah. I'll text it to you, and you can put it in. You can put it in right here. Chris was like, "This is the longest I've wore a mask for forever," and
I thought they were going to do away with that mandate.
They're going to, but it doesn't end till like sometime in April, like the half. I don't remember when it is in April that they're going to do it. Yeah, by the time this airs, it'll be gone. Ben, I'm gonna text you this thing in a minute, but I'm gonna show Chris that. I'm gonna show Tom, Chip this picture. Here's Chris with his mask on, and then he said,
His beard's a filter.
Yeah, his beard's
all his air through
secondary
his beard.
filter. That's right. And then there's and it's like his beard will push out the mask so much that it's like it's not even really.
Don't get me started on that.
But then here's a picture of Tom. Tom's already asleep he said we hadn't even took off yet.
That's right. I'm familiar with that shot.
Yeah. Ben, I'll send you both of those pictures so you can put them on with Tom. Can Tom so you and Tom have been hunting buddies for how long?
Oh gosh, since high school, really.
Wow.
College when he went to college. I didn't go to college, but
yeah,
when he was in college.
And then y'all are brother-in-laws now.
We are married to twins.
Married twins, yeah. So what can you tell us about Tom and sleeping?
Is this where we're going?
Yeah, of course. This is a podcast.
Well, that's the reason I said I was very familiar with that scene. I mean, at the camp especially, we Aiden and myself have a lot of fun with him, going to sleep on the couch or in the middle of a conversation, or has been known to spill his coffee on himself more than once. So we kind of sit across the room and watch him and take bets on how long it's going to take before he falls asleep with his coffee on his chest. So he has done that. We've been very nice though. Most of the time we'll go over there and remove his coffee cup from his chest
while he's asleep.
We've done that more than once. So
that's good.
So we have mercy on him, but
and
it's a lot of fun.
And now y'all got Chris in on the camp too up there. So
oh yeah, and more importantly, the boys, as we call them.
Yeah, that's right. And boys, they'll teach you a whole lot, won't they?
Absolutely. They and of course, my Aiden's their partner in crime, so you can't think of the things they can get into.
I'm sure. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. We
close that.
We have a lot of you have a lot of opportunities there to like Deuteronomy 6 as you go about walking down the road, teach them. And so as we hunt, sitting in the blind, a lot of times there's no ducks, but there's no lack of talking and studying and answering questions, and
that's right,
and prosing questions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Chris talks about too is I know he mentioned on one of our podcasts, but it's like he's like, my boys are gonna go, hunting, and he's like, there's no better people for them to be, rabbit hunting or duck hunting with or whatever than elders in the church. So it's there's not anything you can do that's more important, I think, with our kids, with our youth, teenagers, than for them to be around Christians and see them having fun,
without all the craziness that most of the world considers to be fun.
That's right.
We have a lot of time. Of course, there's a lot of fun. Of course, there's no drinking. There's no cursing. There's no, so it's just a good, wholesome thing for them to be involved with and really be able to see how to enjoy life the way God wants us to. I mean, He wants us to enjoy His creation and enjoy the things He's blessed us with, and so we really try to do that and try to have a positive influence on. We've had several guests, coming this year. That's kind of been our goal since we started the camp and have remodeled our little house and stuff. Our goal is really to have a place where we can bring people. So we do Bible time in the evening, and their kids do Bible time with our boys. So it's just a good thing, and we hope that it's going to be a very positive influence for a long time. So.
That's right, and that's the whole thing too. Is whatever you do it all in the name of the Lord. And so if you're listening to this podcast this week and you got a hunting camp or a deer lease or whatever, like see how can you use that not just to try to tag an animal, but influence people's lives. And
if that's not really the focus of your job and everything you do, then you don't have your mind right, because it really is all the things that God's blessed us with. The Bible tells us as we go about the things that we do, we should be, sharing Him and living in a way that we can have a positive influence. So it's really just it's a mindset, like Romans 12, 1 and 2 talks about them. We got to transform our mind, renew our mind, and, not be transformed by the world, but have that influence on the world. So that's really, what it's all about. That's really about our mindset, getting our mind right about how we think about the things God's blessed us with and the opportunities that we have. It's real easy to just miss the opportunities. Every day we're coming in contact with people and doing things and being involved in things, and it's easy to miss those opportunities. So we just have to get our mind right so we think about it the right way and really try to seize those opportunities.
Absolutely. And so Chip's not just Chris's boss. I was just making the joke at the start, but it's having guys like you and Tom and Brian, and of course, when I first hired in, Don and Charles were here too, and just having men like you, it just makes it easy for us to decide that we want to work here, with these people and have the vision that you elders do. So, all right, so I'm going to I guess before I ask you a number between 1 and whatever, I just want to say too that be praying for the work that for mission trips all over the world, but especially the work in Honduras. Chris and Tom are down there right now, and by the time this airs, they'll be back. But your prayers certainly are coveted, and we desire to have those for the work that's down there. And if it really wasn't for a trip to Honduras, I probably wouldn't be here today, but that's where I'd met Chris at, and in that trip and the outlook of evangelism, I'd always use friendship evangelism, which to me is one of the best forms, building those relationships and those type things. But I always had time on my side. And when I went on that first mission trip and studying with people, it's like we were there, evangelizing for a week, and part of that is like, I studied the gospel with people, and we had like 20 something people who responded to the gospel, and like 5 people who were restored, and I was blessed to have a study with 5 of those people, and but then those weren't the ones that broke my heart. It's the ones who knew and believed what was saying, what the word was saying, but then they refused the gospel, and it just broke my heart. And so it changed my mindset of not just inviting people to church, but saying, hey, let's, other than 4 hours this week, other than Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, then I'm open. Let's have a Bible study, and it'll clear your mind. It's more people are apt to go fishing or hunting with you and getting a study or drinking a cup of coffee than they are to go, oh, I need to not go, I need to fit these 4 hours into my time of going to church, et cetera. So,
yeah, it's really, again, it goes back to our mindset. What is our mindset? Because all those things we have to, as Christians, we need to have an ulterior motive in all our relationships, all the things that we do. And it's a good ulterior motive, but our ulterior motive is to influence people, is to try to find an opportunity to share the gospel with them. And so it really goes back to that mindset, just that we think that way, because those opportunities, like I said, they miss us. We miss them. I know I missed them for years, and I still miss them today sometimes, but at least I recognize a lot of times when I miss them. I could have done something different or said something different or whatever. So it's just that mindset of having a ulterior motive that I'm gonna be a servant. I'm gonna try to help somebody, or whatever the situation might be, go hunting with them or do whatever I'm doing. But is there an opportunity to maybe answer a question they have or a problem they're dealing with a biblical answer that leads into, them getting to know us a little bit better so that they care about what we have to say. So
yeah, further discussion and like who's that person? That's what I tell a lot of people is like, who's that person going to come to, when they are having that difficult situation, and it's like, well, I'm going to go to the person who's salt and light in my life.
That's right.
And
and we have to really work on ourselves to be that person that somebody will come to.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the person with their hair on fire all the time and you always got a crisis and there's drama around you and you're always in a tizzy, who's going to come to you? So you've got to work on you to be that person that is stable and that people do look at and want to be around and want to have confidence that they can come to you with questions and problems and concerns, and you can help them. So,
yeah, one thing I want to talk too about is, and I tell people this all the time. They're like, what made you why'd you move? Like, why'd you move 6 hours away from 32 years of your home life and all those things? And so I tell people all the time. I was like, well, when these how that my mindset really lined up with the mentality of the leadership here with you elders. And so I just want to confirm for some people, and maybe this will be good for some elders in the church, but like when y'all heard me and we were having discussions, I know that y'all said, and I just want these words to be confirmed, but y'all said, hey, we want to pay you to go to the gym. We want to pay you to take your kids on field trips. And we want to pay you to, to go and build relationships with people or take somebody fishing or whatever it may be. And so, I know you're shaking your head just then, but.
Yeah, and really, if you think about it, that's really what we all should be getting paid to do.
Yeah.
I mean, God's blessed us with a career or a business or a job, and everything's His. We're just stewards of that. And so He expects that of all of us, that as we, go about our life, that we influence people for Him. Not necessarily because we have an obligation, obviously, to our employers and our customers and that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily exactly the same because you're being paid to do that, 40 hours a week,
right,
at least. And you probably laugh at 40 hours a week. I know it's a lot more than that. So, but yeah, that's it. That's exactly the mentality we have is.
Yeah. What mentality do y'all's leadership have on like office hours for any elders that may be listening?
If you need to be in your office, that's fine. But I mean, you're not gonna unless you got people lining up Bible studies and booking times at your office for you to sit down and do it with them. That's not where we want you to be, and that's not the way it happens. It happens by being out in people's lives and being a servant to them, and supporting them when they have trouble, having fun with them when they're having fun, and becoming a part of their life, and sharing their life with them. There's a verse, I forget, is it? I can't remember if it's Corinthians. It's not. It's is it Philippians where it says that. We shared our lives with you.
Oh, yeah, we devoted our lives, yeah.
Yeah, not only did we share the gospel with you, but we shared our lives with you.
And I think it's in 1 Corinthians.
That's a powerful thing to really, if you think about that, because that's not a small thing. If you really think about it, a lot of times we really don't want to share our lives with a lot of people. There are people we come in contact with each and every day, and we really don't want to share our lives with them. We should, but we don't, because of maybe their problems in their life, and that shouldn't keep us from doing that. That's being respecters of people, and that's what God tells us not to do. So, being willing to share our lives with people and make them, bring them into our lives, that's a powerful thing, and it's the thing that makes the difference with most people as far as them carrying what we have to say, because there's a lot of people give lip service to Christianity, and using it in the broadest sense. A lot of people give it lip service, but do we really do what God calls us to do, and in terms of sharing our life with people and really influencing people?
Yeah, I don't think that this was. I don't think this is it, but the one I was thinking of was 2 Corinthians 8, just talking about how that they were given, and how that, and not only as we had hoped for, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. But that's not the verse I think that I think that
Tom if Tom's watching this right now, he's saying, "Oh, he's hollering out what the name of it is because it's one of his favorite verses."
Oh, it is. But yeah, that's the whole point, is that the church in Corinth, they.
Maybe I'll find it.
That's fine. They gave themselves, to the Lord, but I think some verses talk about that passage you're looking up. I was trying to look up shared and lives, but I don't think that that's it. It might have been shared ourselves, but yes, 1 Thessalonians 2:8.
That's right, Thessalonians.
Yeah, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and in verse 8 says, "So affectionately longing for you, we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become dear to us." And it's hard to really, and there's churches like KW where, you can become dear to people really quickly. But, if you're really dear to somebody, like just spending an hour a week with them, that's not, which hopefully you spend more than that. But but you talk about, we shared our lives. And so, that was a real blessing for us. And I think that, I tell people all the time, and this is real strange for preachers when I tell them that Sunday's my day off, and they're like, "What?" And it's crazy, and it was hard for me to wrap my mind around it at first. Whenever it was on my job description that, hey, we're going to pay you Monday through Friday to do all these things, and part of that is to prepare for your sermon, But yeah, we don't want you in the office, and then Chris and I are expected, on Sundays to be just like the rest of the congregation. I mean, and that's to if there's a teacher on Sunday, or if there's someone who's song leading, or if they're whatever,
somebody else is preaching.
Yeah, somebody else. That's right. And so it's the whole idea is that they're not paid for that. We're expected to do that as far as God's people. And if your talent is to preach, then preach. If your talent's to lead singing, or whatever it might be, or to teach, then teach that. So anyways, it's a mentality, and that's one thing I appreciate about you guys. And so let's jump into a question. And so we answered a bunch, and so I'm gonna ask you to answer to pick a number between 1 and 40.
1 and 40. I'm gonna say 7.
7. All right, Chip.
Uh-oh.
Good job. So it says, what does the Bible say about homosexuality?
Oh man, that's an easy one to answer. It's just a hard one to answer without offending some people.
That's right. And so these are questions that were submitted in, and that's a hard thing too to think about. It's like when you for me to just talk to somebody who's way outside of who's outside of my life, it's hard to tell them about it's hard to really tell somebody something that they need to change when they don't know that I love them. And so Ephesians, 4 talks about how that we should be speaking the truth in love, that's when we'll grow up in all things. And so homosexuality it's just a sin, just like any other sin is. And so the Bible is very clear about it. And I think we can let's go to 1 Corinthians 6, first of all. And we can talk about that, but just because, not everything has to be answered right then and there with somebody in their life, as far as, if there's not every wrong has to be corrected immediately. Now, certainly God desires righteousness, but if I'm actually trying to impact somebody's life and actually get them to change from something, focusing in on their problems or their issues to start with, that's not really the way to go about it.
Well, if there were other things in a person's life that you knew that was a struggle for them, that's not where you would start.
Mm-hmm.
So why start with homosexuality? If somebody's that's homosexual, I mean, why would you start there? That's not going to be productive.
Right.
Just like you say, it's just not going to be the way to go about it. And it all does boil down to loving people. Some people are harder to love than others. There are people who, I know some people that are homosexual that I really like.
Mm-hmm.
They're very personable. I enjoy being around them. They're, have a good personality. They have a good demeanor, and I think they're very caring, loving people. But you could say that about a lot of people that may have sin in their life that you don't even know, to the extent that it's corrupting them and causing problems for them and stuff. I mean, you could say that to some degree about everybody, because we all struggle with sin. So it's we sometimes separate that. I think sometimes because we're scared of not knowing how to deal with it, we kind of avoid that.
Yeah, we're paranoid because the word, homosexual comes out, and so I'm paranoid, one, to go, well, I don't want to offend somebody, and then the second thing is well, I don't know enough about this, I'm scared to just address it or whatever, and so
yeah, and really the hard thing is how to effectively address it with people, and it's going to be like anything else. I mean, if you're really going to be able to have an impact on somebody that's chosen that lifestyle, it's going to be because you build a relationship with them. Gosh,
yeah,
that's a hard thing to say. Well, that's just the truth, and you just have to be able to love people where they're at. And there's lots of examples we can look at, just other situations. Some people that have just a lot of different lifestyle than us. You take people that we help through our benevolence program to a large extent. People are uncomfortable a lot of times trying to help somebody that they may have a drug problem. They obviously have a problem managing their life.
Mm-hmm.
They can't manage their money and their time and all those kind of things. So, people are uncomfortable trying to help them also. And some of it stems from, how do I do this? How do I go about it? And so you kind of have to just do it to learn how to do it. You have to do it to learn, well, that was a mistake. I tried to help them, but it wasn't the right thing. And God will bless all of that. God will bless our mistakes even in doing that. Even when we spend time and do the wrong things in trying to help somebody, God will still bless our efforts in doing that. But it's all part of that same problem, as far as, like I said to start with, it's really a simple thing, I think, for most of us to understand the problem, but it's just hard to help that person. It's just a very complicated thing. And on top of all that, you put our culture today that is making it even harder.
Yeah,
because,
that's right. We have to take a little bit of break.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back. We're going to dive into some of that a little bit more.
All right.
Life in general is about decisions. Every decision that you make has consequences, and you're tethered to every single one of them. Jesus gives us this awesome opportunity that you don't have to make all the decisions in your life all on your own. You see, he invites you to come to him, to learn from him, Jesus gives us this perfect example, and he tells us in Matthew chapter 11, he says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm meek and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light." We have so much to learn from Christ, and he gives us this example of saying, if you really want to learn from me, take my yoke. You see, yokes were used back in Bible times to put two animals together to pull a load or to pull a cart or to plow ground. And you would put an ox together, or you would put two mules together, and they would pull the load together. And that's what Christ offers for us, is he's offering to pull the load for us. Christ invites us to come to him, and we're to be his followers, disciples, learners, people who have yoked in with him. And he builds a community around us called the church. The church is to be made up of people who God have looked at their hearts. You see, the world wants to paint a picture of everything that would divide us. The church has painted a picture of the things that unite us. That Christ, he builds this community that when we've yoked in with other people, they may be different from us, but we can learn from each other. What a beautiful thing that it is when we can have difficult conversations. There's no conversation that the church can't have. And that's what Christ wants from us, is he wants community that's strong, that's yoked in together, that learns from each other. And most importantly, that learns from Jesus. And he invites us to come, take. Yeah, so continue that thought, with our culture today and those struggles. But you talked about, you were just saying how that, God will even bless our mistakes. That
a lot of times we don't, a lot of times people don't do anything because they don't know exactly what to do or because they're scared they're going to make a mistake. And that's really not a good attitude.
That's burying the talent.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to do anything, so I'm going to go bury this talent because I'm afraid.
And a lot of times, I've seen it with decisions that have had to be made in circumstances, and I think I know exactly the best way to handle this. And, through discussions and consensus, we come up with some other, maybe you're involved in that or maybe not, it may be the elders, but we come up with some other path, to try to solve the problem. And it winds up being, I was wrong.
Right.
So,
yeah.
A lot of times what I think necessarily is the best thing to do, it may not be the best thing to do. And so sometimes we're going to make mistakes even when we're trying to help people. But if our heart's right and we're, our goal is to influence people for Christ and to help the kingdom and doing it with the right attitude, like you said, in terms of doing it all in love, then God can even use those mistakes to help things work the way that they need to. So
yeah, I was reminded of this verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 12, "For if there is first a willing mind, it is accepted according to what one has and not according to what he does not have." And so, that whole idea is that God says, if you got a willing mind about this, now we're going to be very clear that we're going to stand on the truth of Scriptures that God does not approve of homosexuality the same way he doesn't approve of drunkenness or somebody kicking in a door and stealing something from somebody. But they're all the same. And so the question that I would ask for people, one, is if you are if you were a person who's in the church and in the Lord's church, and if this person was trying to get away from a lifestyle of drinking, or if they were trying to get away from a lifestyle of lying, would you help that person, or would you leave them on their own? And if you answer yes, I would help that person, then why is that not the same for someone who struggles with homosexuality? Now, I understand that there's dangers and things, having people, boys and boys staying in cabins versus girls and girls staying in cabins. And used to, you thought, if we put the boys over here, well, we're all safe or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, literally, we've had issues with homosexuality at camp where, I mean, had caught two individuals in a shower together, and it's like, you're gone. You can't have that. The same way that if we catch somebody stealing something, you're gone. And then the other issue is that I would ask someone, who's not in the church, who would be looking at homosexuality and they approve of it completely. And they say it's okay to live a lifestyle of homosexuality. And this one's real close to me because I have a cousin who I love dearly, and he's I hope he gets to watch this podcast, but I love him very much, and our other cousins love him as well. But years ago, he professed that after 10 years of marriage to his wife, he claimed he was homosexual and left her and is now with a man. And so I had to make a decision. How is this going to affect things? And so I love him and still gone out to eat with him and eat with him and things, and there's spend time with him, and he's very talented, and I just love him to death. But the decision had to be made, So I want people to understand like that, there's I love him the same way that I love another cousin who's living in fornication right now and still spend time with him. And the whole idea though is to try to bring influence on them. And I love them so much I want them to go to heaven. So the question that I would have to ask to somebody who absolutely approves of homosexuality is well, do you approve of someone while you're gone somewhere coming to your house and stealing from you? And if you approve of somebody coming and stealing from you, and then not only that, but would you approve of that behavior over and over and over again? Or let's say this. Let's say that your boss lies to you, and they lie to you and say, "Hey, you're gonna get we're gonna give you $3,000 a week." And you get your check and there's $1,200. And yeah, we're going to do that the next time. And then you work another week, and then it's like then you get $1,200 again. And would you allow them to continue to lie? And if you answer no to lying and stealing, then why would you accept another behavior that would? And so they call it love. And so they're saying, well, hey, well, how can I tell somebody, who they can love or who they can't love? They're missing the whole. They're defining love as far as a worldly thing, and so you can't have Christianity and have willful sin living together, no matter what it is. And so the question singled out homosexuality, and so we have to answer that one on here. And what does the Bible say about it? And so we preface those things, but the Bible's very clear. So let's go to 1 Corinthians 6. 1 Corinthians 6. And these are verses that that people don't like sometimes. But there was homosexuality. There was people who were in the church that once lived in homosexuality. 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 9. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Don't let anybody lie to you. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God. And so it's very simple that if I'm going to continue to live in those things, that I'm not going to inherit God's kingdom, and it's foreign to his kingdom. Verse 11, and he says, and such were some of you. And that's a past tense verb. You were this way. Such were some of you, but you were washed, but you were sanctified, but you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. So the Bible's clear that homosexuality lives in the same section as someone who's thieving, or someone who's having sex outside of marriage. someone who's cheating on their spouse. That's another thing. Would you accept your spouse if they're continuously stepping out on the marriage and going, I'm just going to approve of that? No, you're not going to approve of that.
But there are people who do.
Yeah.
There are people who have those kind of marriages. So all that is a perversion of what God intended things to be. So that's really what you have to recognize in the Bible. That's clearly what the Bible's saying here, that. So to answer that question, I mean, that answers it.
Yeah.
And probably the person that asked the question was asking a little more than just that. Maybe not, but, and I think that goes to, well, how do we deal with that now as a Christian? How do we help somebody that's in that has that mindset? So that's the hard thing.
Yeah, and that's the and in context here, so the Christian might also ask, well, can I be around that person? And so 1 Corinthians 5 answers that for us. Let's look at verse 9 of 1 Corinthians 5. Because people will go, well, how in the world is your church going to allow someone to, who's homosexual? How are you going to let them through your doors? Well, okay. So we're going to ask everybody when they walk in, hey, have you lied this week?
Covetousness is in that same list.
Exactly.
So is that you're not going to readily know. I mean, you can tell by lifestyle sometimes that people have a problem with covetousness, but you don't know that. And it's not our place to try to read hearts. So you're not going to, so that does help us, I think, have a little insight into the fact that sin is the problem we all have. And regardless of what our sin problem is, it separates us from God without the blood of Christ. And so that's our whole point about the whole thing is, getting people to change, getting people to change their life, because you don't have to be a homosexual to go to hell.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, people who would consider themselves very strong morally, but they're not living a life of faith. They're living for themselves. And you think about the contrast there, a person who's living for themselves and not living for Christ is lost. So it's just, we all have that. I mean, that's the problem. That's the ultimate problem. This is just a manifestation of it. It makes it very hard to deal with. And like I said, if you go back to, from a cultural standpoint, I think that compounds people's problems with dealing with it, because we don't want to speak up because of being how we would be branded or thought of, or, from a cultural standpoint. And it's all being pushed in our schools, our colleges, our, just companies, just our media, everything. This whole perversion of what love is pushed to defend these kind of lifestyles, and we just have to be willing to stand up to that in a nice way, in a loving way, and hopefully, because of the way that we treat people and care about people and love people and serve people, we can have an opportunity to have that dialogue. If we don't do that, we're not going to be able. There's certain people we're not going to be able to have a dialogue or relationship with if we're not living right. So
yeah,
it goes back to that too.
That's right. And so you brought up covetousness, and it's in this list, and it's like, well, if you're coveting, if something is driving your mindset, if whatever it might be, if I have to have that truck or that bass boat, and it just consumes my mindset so much because I saw that my friend or somebody else had one, and that's my driving thought, and I'm coveting that, and it's taking precedence above God, then I'm living a lifestyle then that's not holy and acceptable to God. And so there's a lot of standards that the world will put on it that it's not.
Well, we're talking about the standards the world puts on it, but what kind of standards do Christians put on it?
Yeah.
I mean, we think about covetousness is not something that we would probably put in that list. Mm-hmm. All right, but God put it in that list, and He put it in that list for a reason, and it's because the things our what's acceptable to us as Christians even a lot of times aren't in line with the Bible, and so We want to be we're real hard on people about the things they have a problem with, but we're not so hard. We don't so easily recognize the things that we may have a problem with. We kind of give those a pass. It's like if I'm done wrong, I want justice.
Yeah.
If I do somebody wrong, if
want
I do wrong, I want mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just human nature. That's just the way that we are. So we have to be careful about that, because that really does mess up our ability to really interact with people in a way that's effective for the brotherhood.
Yeah, and Jesus, he preached on Luke 12:15. He said, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, that life does not consist of the abundance of what someone has." And then he talks about this, this guy who had all these riches, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger barns, and I'm going to build something greater. I'm going to tear down this house, build a bigger house, and I'm going to get rid of this truck, and I'm going to get a better truck." And he says, "Fool, tonight your life's going to be required of you." And it's it's a big thing. And so we're not singling out homosexuality. This question did, but all sin is foreign to God, and whatever it is that I'm living in, that if I'm separating myself from God. And so for us as Christians, that if I'm going to take 1 Corinthians 6 and I'm only going to single out homosexuality or the sins that I don't have that aren't really affecting me, then we can see how people in the world people who would support homosexuality would go, "Man, y'all are being a bunch of hypocrites right here. And you're speaking against somebody else." And so, we have to be careful that we're going to speak the truth, but then we're going to deliver it in a way that we care about those people.
Yeah, and that's a big Matthew 18, the parable of the unthankful servant. That's a kind of an example of that attitude.
Yeah, let's go there and look at it.
Okay. That we it's very easy for us to not appreciate what God's done for us, because we had a debt we couldn't pay, and God took care of it for us through Christ. So that should make me live my life with a different attitude towards others, because I'm not deserving of anything. Nobody owes me anything. And God's saying, "Hey, you better not hold a grudge. You better not hold something against somebody that they do to you, because it's insignificant to what you did to me, to God." What we all do, what the smallest sin that we might want to, however we want to grade them, how egregious that is to God, then we want to think ourselves better than other people. So it just helps us with our attitude there, I think.
Yeah, and that's Matthew 18. That's kind of 21 through 35, and I guess I'm not going to read it all, but the whole idea here is that you have one person who's been forgiven of he owed a lot of debt to a master, and the master, when he was brought to him, he begged the master, saying, "Forgive me of my debt." It
was an amount that was such that he would never be able to repay it, regardless of how long he worked or what he did.
That's right. It was 10,000 talents, which would it's.
I've heard all kind of
number, and the latest I heard, it's worth about $6 billion. And so it's like, no matter how much you work, you can't pay $6 billion back to whoever you owed it to. But he begged him, and the master forgave him. But then he goes and he finds somebody who owes him 100 denarii, which is about 100 days' wages. And so in comparison, the 100 days' wages would, if you found somebody who owed you $10,000, and then you grab them by the throat, and if the average person works, makes about $100 a day, well, 100 denarii is about 10 grand roughly. And then if you made $100 a day, and how much 10,000 talents is worth, it's worth about $6 billion. And so you find somebody who owes you 10 grand, and you go grab them by the throat, and you tell them, "Hey, you owe me everything, and you got to pay me."
The very mercy that person was shown, they weren't willing to show others.
That's right.
And that's what God's point is. He's not going to forgive us for that one. So when we're not willing to show mercy, to others, whether they're homosexuals or covetousness, have a problem, whatever their problem is, that's not acceptable to God. And so that really is what we have to work on again, going back to mindset.
My mindset towards somebody else.
Absolutely, because we have been so blessed and so forgiven that we should just have that kind of compassion and love for someone. And I tell people a lot of times to liken it to your child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can be very condemning towards other people a lot of times because they're messed up or they do this or they do that and whatever problem they have. You know, we need to have the attitude towards them like our child, like we would. How many times you had to work with your child about a particular problem or some thing that they're struggling with, you know, and, you know, we have that attitude, and that's really, you think about that, that's the reason God uses that relationship as an example in so many different cases, is that's how he is towards us. So that's the way we should be towards people. We should really, instead of getting mad when somebody does us wrong, we should have compassion and pity on them and be thinking about not how we can get back at them or how I've been done wrong, but what can I do to help them overcome this problem in their life. And so,
and so part of that, maybe at times there may be discipline. There might be things that, and I also might need to not put them in a situation that's a big struggle. Their case in point, recently there was an event at church, and somebody who was new to the church building, we'd never seen this person before, was eyeing something, and they actually had grabbed an envelope that was believed it was a gift to a couple, believed it had money in it. Well, they saw another church member eyeing them. They put it back, and then it's a thing. Well, that church member said, they told me about it later, but they said I didn't want to look like I was being judgmental, and I was like, no, you were using a righteous. You were looking, and you were being a fruit inspector. They were fixing to steal something, and you caught them in the act. It's okay to come tell somebody, and us try to help that person with that problem. And instead of us not doing anything about it, and so they did something about it in that they were watching them, but how much we can have. I said I can't have an impact on somebody's life if I don't know the issue, if I don't know the problem. Well, that person a day later they end up breaking into somebody's house and stealing a whole bunch of stuff from another person. And it's like, well, maybe if we would have known that night, if we could have had an influence, an impact on them, could we have done something different? And so hindsight's always, 20/20. We can see later on, but that's the whole idea, is that we want to have a good impact on people. And God, he wants us to get rid of sin in our lives, and so sometimes that might mean discipline, or sometimes that might mean we got to go these extra steps to really help this person out of this sin and or this struggle that they're facing. But there's so much baggage that comes with, not all sins are real. It all equals death in the end. Wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. And people are like, well, okay, well, that's why I don't want to be about the Bible, because it's, it's death, and that's so harsh or whatever. And well, there's truth, and if you continue this lifestyle, God gives you the free choice to live however you want to live right now. But if you want to be a part of His kingdom, you're going to have to make big changes in your life, whether that's stopping lying, stopping stealing, or stopping homosexuality. Romans chapter 1 talks about this, and there's a couple of things that people will ask me. They're like, I was asked this question recently from somebody who I loved, and they said, well, where does Jesus condemn, two homosexuals getting married? Well, first of all, Matthew 19, when he said, did you not know from the beginning that God made them male and female? And for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And this marriage. So when Jesus approves of a man and a woman getting married, and there's nothing else is talked about, by default, he's excluding a man and a man getting married. And so when they had that, when that question was asked, and I presented it to them in that way, it really made them begin to think differently, about it, and that's what we need to do. And so my cousin, when he first declared to be a homosexual, there was a strong push against that from other family members. People wrote him letters and things, and he said, why couldn't they just have a conversation with me instead of writing me a letter? And so we
Probably
learned,
because they were uncomfortable having that conversation.
That's right. And some of those people who wrote the letters are near and dear to me too, and but through conversation with him, those are generally, that's how I understood those things. But it was because I continued to keep a relationship and to love. But Romans chapter 1 talks about, the Lord being against homosexuality. That verse 21 says, because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts. It goes back to that mindset you were talking about. And their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. And that was a Gentile thing back then. Verse 24, therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of the error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, that's any kind of sexual sin, wickedness, covetousness, there's that covetousness one again, Chip, maliciousness, which would be greed, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. So, the Bible is clear that, that he's against homosexuality, but he's just as much against someone who's proud or boasting or a backbiter or any kind of other wickedness. So,
it really boils down to whatever that is. I mean, just like we were talking about a while ago, but this says that professing to be wise, they became fools. So, that's what we see in the world today. We see what's accepted culturally is foolishness being passed off as wisdom. How this love that is professed for all these perversions, it's just really sad, but it's because they don't have a foundation. They're not willing to acknowledge God's word as the foundation of right and wrong. So, when you don't have that foundation, you have all kind of ideas. I mean, my ideas are just as good as yours if we're just going to go with man's ideas.
Yeah.
That's the whole difference is that we're not saying that. We're not saying these are things of my mind or of your mind. These are things from Scripture. So that's the place we got to start is, what are we going to start at? God's word is the authority, and that's what we need to work off of. Or if we're going to
just go off of opinions,
then anybody's opinion is as good as somebody else's, and there's never an answer to the questions.
That's right. I do want to cover one more thing, and it's based on. So what about if there's someone who's a homosexual and they come to our church and they want to worship with us, or something along those lines? And so how do we deal with that? So I just want to take just a few minutes after this quick break and touch on that real quick. All right. All right. Welcome back from that brief little pause. So here's another thing. It's like, okay, so we've had this happen with our benevolence before, and we had someone, it's great whenever you're really making an impact in the community that other organizations like homeless shelters, we have, I'm not going to name, particular organizations, but, we partner with some organizations in the world, in our community that we help one another. We send them people, they send us people. And so, there's this, not that we're approving of everything they believe in or them approving of everything we believe in, but we're trying to help people, get back on their feet in society from being, homeless or broken. And so, when it comes to housing somebody, and when we can utilize other resources, those are things that are real important. But so, I can remember one day that we had, has been a while back, but a homeless shelter had sent us somebody who they thought we could help. And, sometimes they don't send us people, but they kind of get the idea of who, if these people are really trying to correct their lives, then they've kind of gotten the point that they'll send them to us. But, I remember the day that a transgender person, walked into our building on a Monday or Tuesday or whatever it was, try to get help. And one of our coworkers just wasn't, they were just like, oh my goodness, they weren't used to dealing with that. And I remember they actually had a conversation with you on the phone. You may or may not remember that.
Vaguely.
But it was like, hey,
I hope I gave him good advice.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you did, and I know. And so I asked them, and I know that you talked to them, what's the difference between this and someone who stole something last week? They struggle with it. And so, they need the gospel too. They need the gospel taught to them. But 1 Corinthians 5, right before, all those sins were talked about, that Paul's like, hey, you don't need to be keeping company with certain people. And so I want to read this little passage that he's talking about. But he says, verse 9, I wrote to you in my epistle, that's my letter, not to keep company with sexual immoral people. Now, if we stop right there, we'd say, well, I never need to have another encounter with someone who has ever cheated on their wife. So don't counsel somebody who's cheated on their wife to try to get them to reconcile their marriage. Don't counsel some kid who had sex before marriage and now she's pregnant and struggling with how she's gonna make things work now with life and a baby, or even contemplating abortion. Or, if we just kept this verse only out of context and said, well, then now we're never going to talk to someone, who had sex before marriage at all. Don't keep company with some sexual immoral person. But he says in verse 10, yet I certainly did not mean with the sexually immoral people of this world, or with the covetous. There it is again.
There may be a lesson in there.
It may be a lesson in there for somebody who's been very hypocritical towards somebody and naming homosexuality, but not calling out somebody who had to have that finest truck, in their in their driveway. So yet I certainly did not mean with the sexual immoral people of this world, or with covetous, or extortioners, or idolaters, somebody who's worshiping idols. Since then you would need to go out of the world. He's like, the world's full of these kind of people. But now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone named a brother who is sexually immoral, or covetous, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, not even to eat with such a person. So what he's telling us is like, if someone who's in the world and they're claiming to be a homosexual, you can still interact with them in their life to try to affect them for the gospel. But if somebody who claims that they're a Christian, they're a brother or sister, and they're continuing to live in that lifestyle, he says that's when you need to cut it off. Because if they're claiming I can live in Christianity the way that I am and continue to live in sin and be in the right standing with God, He said that's when you need to cut it off.
And why is that?
Well,
because of the impact that it has on the kingdom as a whole.
yeah.
You know, I mean, if you think about it, it's not the people in the world who attack the world that attack the church that does the church the most harm. It's the people who claim to be in the church but live like the world that does the church the most harm.
Right.
And so that's really what Paul's dealing with there. You know, I mean, we've got to be. Does that mean we're going to be perfect? Obviously not. And we're going to be long suffering with each other. And it really has to do with our mindset again, our attitude. Are we trying to get better? Are we improve? When I throw up my hand and say, that's just the way I am, you know, whether it's
you have to deal with me.
Something more grievous, or if it's just a temper problem. You know, if I just that's a problem. That's a bad attitude, you know, to have as a Christian, because those are things that we all need to be working. We got to work on whatever our shortcomings are, and so that's really the thing. It's about, are we working on this? Are we getting better at it? Are we improving? I think is the question we all have to ask ourselves about all attributes, and we got to be examining ourselves and thinking about it and looking at it real hard. And it's easy to not want to do that. You know, nobody really wants to do that.
Yeah, because you have to let God's word change and transform your life. And if you're not in that mindset of I'm changing, or I'm dealing with this and I'm working at it and I'm striving after this, seeking after it, diligently seeking Him, Hebrews 11:6, that's when it's a problem.
Well, the things, you know, however you want to phrase it, but as a reasonably moral person, you know, the problems, you know, the guy, if I'm doing a Bible study at the jail and the guy's got an orange jumpsuit on, it's pretty obvious to everybody he messed up, you know. Of course, he probably says he didn't. He's falsely accused. But the thing is, as we mature as Christians and as we get better at not doing the things we're not supposed to do, we're still working on doing the things we should be doing, but we are getting better at not doing the things we shouldn't do. It's easy for me to fool people. It's easy for, you know, people to say, oh, Chip, he this and that, and pat me on the back. And I can have a real problem. I mean, God can have a real problem with me in my life, even though it's not seen by everybody else, just in the things that I'm not doing that I know I should be doing.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing we have to be honest, you know, with each other and work at to, you know, make sure that we are doing that, you know, that we're really identifying, because as we mature and as we get, it's easier to fool people.
Yeah.
So we have to be, you know, honest with ourselves and make sure that we're working on the things we need to be working on and doing the things we need to be doing. And like I said, all those things that, you know, all those commands that are not the commands of things not to do, but the commands of things that we're told to do. And there ain't none of us doing all of them, doing them like we should,
right,
or doing all of them. So we don't need to be too proud about the fact that we're not doing all those things. We need to be examining ourselves about, am I doing the things that I should be doing, that Jesus commands us to do? So,
yeah, I can remember preaching the sermon about, you know, on covetousness, and it was, you know, just preaching what Christ was teaching. And I can, you know, you think about it. I just thought to myself, it's like, you know, this is a hard thing to do, to preach to people who are, you know, really can be caught up in this. And so this is, so I hope that this answers, people's questions. You got anything else you want to add on this, or that you can think of, or?
Not really. Like I said, I think for most of us, the answer to the question is really not that hard.
Yeah, the Bible's clear about it.
It's just that a lot of people don't like that answer. And so that's kind of what we have to deal with as Christians, to try to help people. And it's going to go back to just the fundamentals of recognizing God's word as the authority, and being willing to work with that. You know, if you're not willing to work with that, you can kind of go wherever you want to. So.
Yeah, one thing that was brought up to me too, it just hit me about this, but somebody says, well, you know, the Bible, the Old Testament also says that you shouldn't be getting a tattoo, you know, and so they're like, well, I'm pretty sure that everybody down by that pool that I saw, you know, there's a bunch of tattoos. Are we going to call them out too about that? In fact, I mean, a guy who's in our, you know, ministry, who's in charge of a First Sunday night ministry, he was a tattoo artist at one time, and he has them all over him, and you know, we love him just as much as anybody else. But one thing that I wanted to bring up too for anybody who might not have much Bible knowledge is that we live under the New Testament and the New Covenant. And so that was an Old Testament principle. And so the verses that we read they're New Testament. They're it was formed by the blood of Jesus at his death. And so to answer your question, we're not bringing up some Old Testament, old law, that was against tattoos back then too. We're not just bringing up those verses, but we're also bringing up verses that are under the New Covenant. And, so we hope that we've answered your question, and thank you for listening. And
one thing I would say is, I mean, these are the kind of questions it's real hard to answer just broadly. Yeah. I mean, I'm not, we understand what's right and wrong, but in terms of people's circumstances and situations, it's all just real personal. So it's something that we have to, be willing. And again, that goes back to being willing to actually sit down and have that conversation. So they're just real specific circumstances and situations that pertain to that person. And so that's really the way that these kind of things have to be dealt with and handled to do it justice.
Yeah. Case in point, I can remember in 2017 sitting down with a lady and having a discussion with her, and then she even asked me about we were dealing with some other sin, and we were dealing with getting drunk, and so I read that passage in 1 Corinthians 6 that includes drunkards as well as homosexuals. Well, she stopped and she said, "I don't believe that verse is from God," and I said, well, why not? And she's like, well, my son's a homosexual, and I just don't believe that God would say that about him. And so that was a baggage for her, Sure. And, one of your daughters was in on that Bible study with me, and she was there with me, studying with the lady. And I can remember, Carly, we talk about that Bible study, from time to time, but here I'm like, how do you not believe that's not from God's word? And so inside of me, my blood pressure was up, and here I'm learning, I'm always learning how to study with people. And I'm like, how can you not believe that that's not God's word? So then it's like, now I'm going to 2 Timothy 3, and I'm going to Bible thump. And the lady goes, just please stop, just stop. And so I was like, well, ma'am, this is from, she's like, just please stop. Like I can't. And what it was, she just couldn't deal with it in that moment. And she had so much going on. And so finally it hit me that it's like, Bob, you need to listen to her. You need to stop. And well, I stopped that. And so all I did is I just went to the Old Testament. We just started reading in Psalms, and we had a study with that. And well, because I chose to love her in that moment and not Bible thump her, she actually made a decision to continue to come back. And we continued to study with her. And then she told me a few weeks later, she's like, I was wrong about that. And so, but I had to swallow my pride in that study and not be thumping things. And, we ended up baptizing that lady.
We have to give people time sometimes.
That's right.
We have to be long-suffering as God has been with us.
Yep. Ephesians 4:15, speaking the truth in love. This is the Unscripted Podcast.